All right, so we're a somewhat diminished group this evening. I'm not sure exactly the reason for that, but it's also a somewhat diminished amount of Rashi material tonight. So I guess there's a certain symmetry there, and I will tell you, a friend of mine wrote a few years ago that his kid who was studying in a day school asked him when we got to Parashat Trumah, he says, Abba, how come the weekly Parsha is so boring all of a sudden? And I don't know that it's necessarily boring per se. And I will admit, um, there's a rabbinic understanding that if you're studying Torah and and the text seems to you like lacking in meaning, the problem is most likely not the text. The problem is most likely you.
Right.
And I acknowledge that. Having said that, I mean, we're getting into a section of the book of Exodus that really deals in intricate detail with the construction of the tabernacle. Um, and I will tell you that I have, never built anything more I mean, even like putting up the sukkah every year is a bit complicated um, for Kelly and me. And, so I honestly have trouble following some of the Parsha, and Rashi doesn't really make it any clearer. Um, and so, a lot of that material I have not brought down because it's hard for me to teach what I don't understand, frankly. Um, and I would also say that here is where Rashi. I mean, Rashi's overwhelming goal is to explicate the plain meaning of the text, right? I mean, he doesn't always do that. He certainly gets into plenty of midrashic material as well, but we've seen Rashi say several times something along the lines of "Ein hamikra Ein hamikra yotze yedei pshuto," which means that the text never loses its plain meaning, right? Whatever midrashic meaning you want to layer onto it, um, it, it doesn't eliminate the original sort of plain meaning of the text. But if you look at um, Hasidic commentaries, and Hasidic commentaries are much more recent. I mean, Hasidism as a movement is only about 250 years old, and the best Hasidic commentaries are much more recent even than that. But if you look, for example, there's a collection called Iturei Torah, which um, which is a collection of mostly Hasidic. It's not only Hasidic, but it's mostly Hasidic commentaries. And Iturei Torah takes this material and spiritualizes it entirely. It's not at all interested in how you construct the tabernacle and explaining how that was done. It gives, I mean, for the commentators in Iturei Torah, all of this is allegorical. But this is not a class in Iturei Torah, so perhaps one day, if I think far enough ahead, when we get to this parsha next year or the year after, maybe we'll do Iturei Torah on Trumah instead of Rashi on Trumah. But for now, we have what we have. All right. So, and actually, the first comment that I have here is not on the reading for this week. It is the last verse of the first triennial rather than the first verse of the second triennial, because I thought it was interesting, and it kind of rounds out what we're doing. All right, so um, now this is in the context of the construct of the building of the menorah. All right, and here God says to Moses, "Ur'e va'aseh betavnitam asher ata moreh bahar." Now see and make according to the patterns which you are shown on the mountain. Okay, so Rashi has two comments here. One of them, the second one is really a grammatical one, but I should note that there are a number of times in this parsha where God says, as I will show you, or as I have shown you, right? I mean, which helps perhaps to explain why the text is so difficult to understand, right? Because there are certain things that verbal descriptions can carry you only so far, right? I mean, if you look, I mean, people make jokes about IKEA directions, right? Now, the IKEA directions, which are really just all pictures, right? Now, the reason for that is IKEA operates in so many different countries that they don't want to have to, create a set of instructions for every item in every language of every country that they are. But there's something that's quite useful about the IKEA directions, right? I mean, I assume that everybody, at some point in their life has put together something from IKEA or something, solder woodworking or something like that, right? I mean, when you have a picture, it's a lot easier than just relying on words, right? And as I mean, an example that I've given, right? If somebody comes to me and says they want to learn how to put on tefillin, right? You can't just describe that to them, right? The best way to teach somebody to how to put on tefillin is with, a set of tefillin, an arm, and a forehead, right? It's to simply try to explain to somebody without actually showing them how it's done is very, very difficult. And, I think that the Torah somehow, understands this, right? So here's what Rashi says, Re'eh v'aseh and make, Re'eh kan bahar tavnit she'ani mareh otcha. See here on the mountain the form, the pattern that I am showing you. Magid shenitkashem Moshe b'maseh hamenorah. This teaches us that Moses had difficulty with constructing the menorah until the Holy One, blessed be He, showed him a menorah of fire. Right? In other words, even Moses had difficulty with understanding the instructions. So finally, I mean, as I see it, God got frustrated and says, "Okay, here, all right," and holds up, a menorah of now I understand, right? And I mean, we've all had that experience, right? At some point of not being able to understand instructions that somebody's given you. I mean, in a million ways, right? Somebody's trying. I mean, now we have GPSs and whatever, right? But trying to give you, right? I mean, and someday in the future, people won't even know what we're talking about, right? But somebody's trying to give you directions how to get somewhere, and they say, well, Do you have a piece of paper and a pencil and they draw you a map, right? Because words alone are sometimes not um, sufficient, right? Is there any? I mean, I think this is pretty clear and pretty self-evident. But are there any questions or comments on this particular part of it? Yeah, Toby, muted.
I was just wondering, does the MEN period 29A stand
Oh,
for?
Menachot 20 Menachot is the Talmudic tractate. In
Okay.
other words, so the translator is telling you that this is not Rashi's original idea. This is not something that Rashi,
Okay.
that the source of this idea is found in the Talmud in tractate Menachot, page 29a.
Okay.
This translator actually does that fairly frequently, which I think is is interesting because like I say, Rashi is assumed to be simply an anthologizer of stuff that came before. And it's not so. I mean, there is stuff that is original to Rashi, but a lot of what he does is indeed an anthology of older material. I mean, that's what's kind of great. I mean, he knew everything. I mean, there's nobody else I mean, certainly there's no commentary that's as widely accepted and as authoritative, but to think, that he has a commentary on the whole Tanakh and on the whole Talmud. I mean, that's, pretty, I mean, even Steinsaltz didn't do that. All right. So,
Rabbi Arian?
Yeah.
What confuses me is I'm thinking about Sinai and Moses getting the Ten Commandments, but I have absolutely no memory of there being either a pattern of or the actual menorah up there.
No, I mean, it's not just the Ten Commandments. It's far from it. I mean, actually, we didn't have Rashi class last week, but Rashi in his commentary to the beginning of last week's parsha, which is Mishpatim, goes to great lengths to emphasize that from the rabbinic perspective, the entire Torah was given at Mount Sinai and not just the Ten Commandments. Okay, so but here, I mean, here it's explicit. Moses has, this is well after the Ten Commandments. Moses has been brought back up the mountain, and he is up there for 40 days and 40 nights receiving instruction. Now, it gets complicated because while he's gone, not in this week's parsha, but while he's gone for 40 days and 40 nights getting all these instructions, the people start to worry, where is he? And they build the golden calf, right? And part of the problem is that Moses didn't tell them how long he would be gone, right? And therefore, they perhaps not unreasonably worried that he was never going to come back because he was up there by himself. But from the perspective of the Torah, I mean, and I don't want to overstate this, all right, because the sort of the normative Orthodox belief is that the Torah in its entirety was revealed at Mount Sinai, right, including the last few paragraphs that talk about Moses' death and burial. Right now, that is certainly a conservative Jew is permitted to believe that, but not required to believe that. Um, the Torah never makes that claim, but the Torah certainly claims that much more than merely the Ten Commandments was given to Moses at Sinai, right? Including, for sure, the instruction as to how to construct the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary in the desert. So yeah, absolutely, Moses is up there at Sinai. I mean, this is not Rashi inventing this. This is from the text. All right. So the next comment, Asher ata more. Okay, so this is a grammatical explanation, because this word, and again, I mean, I know, a lot of you, I mean, you all know some Hebrew, but maybe not enough Hebrew to pick up on the grammatical difficulty. But particularly, if you're looking at this without vowels, and to tell you the truth, I don't know. I mean, certainly, all right, how shall I say? The vowels was the vocalization. The vocalization of the text is much later than the consonants of the text, right? It's much, much later. But certainly the vocalization of the text was fixed well before the time of Rashi. Although not, I mean, a couple centuries, right? Not thousands of years, but not like last week either. So Rashi certainly had access to a vocalized text. Having said that, I honestly don't know, and I don't know, maybe Marcia or Barnaby, you do know. Could we assume that the average Jew, right, and Rashi's writing for the average Jew, right? Could we assume that, and we know that, why do we know that? Because sometimes there's a difficult Hebrew word that he has trouble explaining by use of other Hebrew words. So he simply translates it into French, right? So would the person studying Torah with Rashi's commentary contemporaneously have a vocalized or an unvocalized text in front of him? I'm actually going to assume an unvocalized text, because printing hadn't yet been invented, and you were dealing with stuff that was written by scribes. So, but I have to admit that I'm not 100% for sure on this question. But the way it's vocalized is Asher ata more bahar, which you are shown. Okay, so he's looking at this because the Hebrew is difficult, so he translates it according to the Targum. Okay, the Targum is the sort of authorized rabbinic translation of the Bible, right? And it came into use because certainly, like in Babylonia, the Jews knew Aramaic much better than they knew Hebrew. So it was necessary, but the Targum is not simply a translation. It's more of a paraphrase, like where there is stuff in the Hebrew text that could be understood heretically. The Targum, particularly Onkelos, paraphrases it rather than translating it word for word. So it's not illegitimate that if you're not 100% sure what the Hebrew actually means, you look at the Aramaic, and the Talmud is that they art mitchazeh. All right, mitchazeh, clearly, I mean, I'm not a super expert at Aramaic, but I know enough, and that definitely means which you are shown. Okay, if it were punctuated mare rather than more, okay, it would mean which you show others, right? And you could read, I mean, if you were reading that without vowels, you would probably read it as asher tamare bahar, which means which you show to others on the mountain, right? But so Rashi wants to make very clear you understand that it means which you are shown, okay? So it makes it passive rather than active. Okay. Any questions on that? All right, then we'll move on. So 26.3, we're dealing with the construction of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle. 5 of these curtains shall be joined to one another. Isha el achotah, and the other 5 curtains shall also be joined to one another. Okay. Shall be joined. He would, Bezalel was the artisan who constructed the tabernacle, would sew them with a needle, one curtain alongside the other 5 separately, and the other 5 separately. In other words, there's two sets of 5 curtains, and the 2 sets of 5 curtains are not joined together, but each of the 5 curtains within one set is joined all to the other, so they're sewn together. But the more interesting comment is on the next phrase, Isha el achota. All right, so what's the issue here? And if you were not looking at this in the Torah, right, and somebody simply said in Hebrew, Isha el achota, what does that mean? Marcia.
I don't know exactly what it means, but this is a section I'm going to chant on Saturday. I saw the Isha, that puzzled me.
Right.
When I looked at the translation, and so I don't really get it.
Okay, Isha is a woman.
Yes.
Right, and Isha el achota means a woman to her sister. Okay, a woman, that's the literal meaning of that phrase. Okay, but every language works the way it works, right? And they don't all work the same way. And Isha el achota, that's what it literally means. So these curtains shall be connected, a woman to her sister, right? But that doesn't, obviously it doesn't, we're not sewing together women, right? We're sewing together curtains, but Hebrew's a gendered language, right? So curtains are female, they're feminine, right? And so Isha el achota, so Rashi says, it is customary for scripture to speak this way concerning a noun in the feminine gender, and concerning a noun in the masculine gender, it says ish el achiv, a man to his brother, as it is said about the cherubim elsewhere in actually in this parsha. Ish el achiv. Okay, the cherubim are also connected one to another, right? So if they so things that are connected one to another, if it's a feminine noun, it's isha el achota. If it's a masculine noun, it's ish el achiv. Okay, so the brother is or sister is figurative. It's not literal. But that would be, I mean, obviously, and Marcia, you're like a real life example of that, because you're preparing this to chant it on Shabbat, right? And you know some Hebrew, but you're not fluent, right? Like I would say Rashi's audience, Rashi's original audience, who probably knew some Hebrew but were not fluent, and they're looking at this and they're saying you know, with a French accent, they're saying the curtains are connected, woman to sister. Right?
Yeah.
And I know that sounds more like an Israeli accent than a French accent. I'm sorry. But doesn't make sense. So Rashi's explaining that this is an idiom. Okay, this is the way Hebrew works. Okay. So thank you for proving Rashi correct.
Right.
Okay. 26 verse 7. And here's where actually the translator kind of screws up the intent or the understanding of the Rashi. All right, so it says Va'asita yiriot izim, you shall make curtains. The translator says you shall make curtains of goat hair, right? But by translating it as goat hair, he obviates the need for the Rashi, right? Because Yiriot izim does not mean curtain. If you're translating it literally, does not mean curtains of goat hair. It means what? Goat curtains, right? Curtains of goat, or goat curtains, right? Izim simply means goats, right? It means goats. It doesn't mean goat hair. It means goats. Right now, obviously, I mean, Rashi's going to explain that when it says curtains of goat, it means curtains of goat hair. It does not mean that you should take goats and sew each goat to its sister and you have a curtain of goats, right? But that's, I mean, here, you know, the translator, by translating in accordance with Rashi, kind of screws up the Rashi a little bit. Okay, so you shall make curtains of goat hair for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle. You shall make 11 curtains. You shall make them 11 curtains. Okay, Yiriot izim, minotza shel izim, right, from the hair of goats, right? So the question is, you know, why is it called Yiriot izim and not say ar izim or notza shel izim? I don't really know. I mean, perhaps it was just self-evident. Perhaps that's the way they spoke. But that's what Rashi is trying to explain. All right, for a tent over the Mishkan, to spread them over the lower curtains. All right. Now, the next verse. Va'asita et hakarashim lamishkan atzei shitim omdim. You shall make the planks for the Mishkan, for the tabernacle, of standing acacia wood. Okay, now, before we get into Rashi, just a little bit of sort of American Jewish obscure history, right? You may be familiar with a song, an Israeli song that goes, Atzei Zeitim Omdim, Atzei Zeitim Omdim, Atzei Zeitim Omdim. That's not the right word. It's Atzei Shitim Omdim, which is in this verse. Atzei Shitim Omdim. But why, when it came to America, did they say Atzei Zeitim Omdim instead of Atzei Shitim Omdim? so that Hebrew school kids won't laugh.
Uh,
Ha ha ha! Shit trees, right?
Yeah,
No, and I'm not joking. I'm
I
not
get
joking.
it.
I'm not. I'm not joking. So rather than give preteen boys a chance to crack up in Hebrew school, they changed it to Atse Zaytim Omdim instead of Atse Shitim Omdim. But it actually reminds me of a wonderful story. Ron Wolfson, some of you may be familiar with. He's written a number of books about contemporary Jewish life and contemporary Jewish education. And he grew up, I think he grew up in Omaha. Anyway, he told a story when he was going to Hebrew school, and they had a beloved, like a truly beloved Hebrew teacher who was a Holocaust survivor. And always, he never lost his accent, right? And he would come into class every day, and he'd stand at the front of the class, and he'd tell the kids, "Okay, everybody take a piece of paper," right? And the kids would always crack up, right? Because he said a piece of paper. So like he was puzzled, right? And so one day he finds out, "Why are you all laughing?" And they explained to him why they were laughing when he said, "Take a piece of paper." And he said, okay, take a sheet of paper. And that's exactly, I was reminded of that by the Atse Shitim Omdim, right? And the Atse Zaytim Omdim. But here is the issue, right? And you would not pick this up not having read the rest of the chapter, but where it says Vasita et ha karashim, you shall make the planks, right? And this is the issue, right? Because the whole rest of the chapter, it doesn't use the infinitive, right? And here the et, right? The et is a participle that can't be translated, but it's always used with the infinitive, right? So if you say you shall make the planks, it's vasita et hakrashim, right? If you simply said you shall make planks, the et wouldn't be in there. Say vasita krashim, right? And we just saw Vasita Yuriot, right? It doesn't use the definite article. It doesn't use the definite article with any of the other pieces of the Mishkan, but it uses the definite article here for the planks, right? So why does it say the planks? Okay, so here, this is clearly midrashic. And if you look down at the bottom of this comment, you can see that it's midrashic, because the translator points out where it comes from, Midrash Tanchuma 9, right? So why does the whole rest of each part is without the definite article, but here it says the planks? And because these particular planks were standing ready and designated for this purpose. Jacob planted cedars in Egypt, and when he was dying, he commanded his sons to bring them up when they left Egypt. He told them that the Holy One, blessed be he, was destined to command them to make a mishkan of acacia wood in the desert. See that they should be ready in your hands. This is what the liturgical poet composed in his liturgical poem. It flew to the planting of the quickened ones, the cedar beams of our houses, for they hurried to have the cedars ready in their hands prior to this moment, right? So there are certain things that are like predestined, right? Like there's this midrash about 10 things that were created at twilight on the sixth day of creation, right? And one of them was the ram that would be sacrificed at the Akedah, right? And another one, I don't remember all 10, but another one was actually the first pair of tongs. Okay, why the first pair of tongs? Because you can't make tongs without tongs, right? You cannot manufacture tongs without the use of tongs, right? So the first pair of tongs was divinely created at twilight, and then you have that the or set of tongs, and then that goes on. But so by using the definite article, it says these are the planks, not just any planks, but the planks that Jacob made. Now I have to say that this solves a problem but introduces another problem, right? Because cedar is arazim, it's not shittim, right? So these planks are made out of cedar, not out of acacia wood, and I honestly don't understand how Rashi doesn't resolve that issue. Okay. Because it's not the same wood. I mean, it's not. I mean, they look somewhat similar, but it's not at all the same wood. I mean, I don't know how many of you have ever been like in the Negev desert or the Sinai, right? I mean, acacia, right? Acacia wood trees are all over the place in the Negev, right? And they're one of the few things that actually manage to grow in the Negev. I don't think you could grow cedars in the Negev, right? But here Ondim, right? And here he goes with French. Estantis in Old French, upright, perpendicular. The length of the planks shall be perpendicular to each other in the walls of the Mishkan. You shall not make the walls of horizontal planks, so that the width of the planks will be along the height of the walls, one plank lying upon another plank. Okay, I have to say I don't even really understand this, but I have trouble like conceptualizing this stuff in my mind. I'm more interested in the fact that Rashi, is using French here to explain what standing means. Does anybody get what Rashi means here? Barnaby?
Well,
yeah.
the way I visualize this is instead of having the plank should be standing upright, so
Right.
the length, and that will determine the height rather than having one lying one upon the other. But I don't always. I just see like with walls that are standing upright rather than horizontal. It's
Right.
kind of hard. This is all very hard to picture.
Right. I mean, so I imagine it like sort of like a picket fence.
Yeah, one alongside, right.
Right, like a picket fence.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather than
one laying on the other, and they're horizontal, and it's just
right.
So the width of the plank determines how I guess how long or whatever, as opposed to the height.
Right. All right. So so the last verse that we're going to look at, V'hakimota et hamishkan k'mishpato asher horeta bahar. You shall erect the Mishkan according to its proper manner. Note that word mishpat. right? Which that was last week's Parsha Mishpatim, right? So there it really meant laws, right? But here, you could say ordinances, right? According to its ordinance.
Well, according to the plan shown.
Right. As you will have been shown, Horeta Bahar. Prior to this, for I am destined to teach you and show you the order of its erection. Okay. Right. In other words, here I guess is the problem. I mean, again, this is an example of the recognition that the words are not sufficient, right? And you have to actually be sort of shown a model, but the problem is that the text is speaking in the past tense about something that hasn't happened yet, right? Erected according to the way you have been shown on the mountain. But he can't erect it, right? He's getting the instructions. He hasn't been shown it yet, right? So, I guess, I've forgotten a lot of my grammar, but I think what this is really talking about is the subjunctive mood, right? Not not erected according to the way you have been shown, but rather erected according to the way you will have been shown at that point, right? But Hebrew doesn't really have a subjunctive. So Rashi is saying, Ani atid lilamedcha ulaharotcha. I am going to teach you and show you the order of its erection or of its construction. Okay. But again, another example, I think I counted at least 3, maybe more. We saw 2 of them, but at least 3 examples in this parsha where God is saying, you know what? Let me just show you.
Yeah.
Because it's tough stuff. It's not easy. It's not easy to follow. But by the time we get to the Talmud, we actually have graphs and drawings in the Talmud itself, but we don't have that in the Tanakh. All right. Any questions, Marcia?
I always found these sections, the details that the parsha that the Torah goes into in such minute details, and yet I could never fully picture what even though there things have been shown, even though there's been books and things sort of describing what they think it looks like, but I always found this was not the most interesting part of the Torah.
No, nor for me. But if you want to see an example, in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, the Mennonites actually have a full-scale replica of the tabernacle. According to the instructions in Exodus. I've seen it. It's kind of weird because it's a proselytizing thing, and it's this whole sound and light show which ends with explaining that in the biblical period you could actually gain expiation for your sins through the blood sacrifices that took place in the tabernacle. But now the tabernacle has been destroyed, and that's why you have to believe in Jesus and all that, So I don't like, but it is a pretty interesting It's on Route 30 in Lancaster in the Mennonite Information Center. They have a full-scale replica of the biblical. I mean, at least they did, 20 years ago when I lived in York. I assume it's still there. So if you ever get super curious to see what it looked like, post-pandemic, get in your car and head up to Lancaster, and you'll be able to see. All right.
Rabbi Arian, I have another major concern, and it really has stopped me cold. Moses is on the mountain receiving the whole Torah, and specifically we're talking about the Mishkan. So he comes back down the mountain with the Torah, and it isn't terribly long after that what happens? The Mishkan is built, except for one thing. All of the materials to build that were already there because they were taken out of Egypt vis-a-vis, I guess, to a large degree, the generosity of the Egyptians. So if Moses didn't know till he went on the mountain what needed to be built and what went into it, how could the Jews have taken anything out of Egypt before?
Well, I mean, they were told to. I mean, even if Moses didn't know, God knew, right? And they were told to. But it's a complicated thing because actually, I mean, and in order to understand this, you have to understand and really buy into the rabbinic principle of ein mukdam u'me'uchar b'Torah. Okay, that the Torah is not narrated in chronological order.
Mhm.
Okay, because while Moses, he doesn't come down with this and then they build the golden calf. They're actually building the golden calf while he's up there getting these instructions, right? And if you look at many of the commentaries on the golden calf, Moses blames God, right? Moses blames God because how do they have the ability to make the golden calf, right? I mean, there's one key ingredient in a golden calf that you can't make a golden calf if you don't have that, and that's gold, right? And why do they have gold? Because God told the Israelites to borrow silver and gold from their neighbors and then take it out of Egypt, right? And if God hadn't told them to do that, they wouldn't have had gold, right? And what's the whole point? What do you need gold in the desert for, right? So, according to the sort of normative rabbinic understanding, which is not chronological, right? I mean, this is actually all after the golden calf, because essentially God realizes that he's left he's left the people without any system of ritual, and so they create a system of ritual on their own, i.e. the golden calf, rather than the divinely instituted system of ritual of the tabernacle. And then the whole idea, I mean, which Maimonides, goes into much deeper, is that these rituals are not for God, they're for us, that we need them as a concrete expression of our desire and relationship for God, but God has no need of them. So. All right. Anything else? All right, great. Thank you. Lila Tov, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. See ya.
Lila Tov.
Bye-bye.